Life Audio.
You're listening to Therapy and Theology, and I'm your host, Carly Mercoulier. This podcast is a space where we explore popular topics and questions related to the convergence of faith, feelings, spiritual formation, and more. My prayer is that through these conversations, we will grow in our awareness of who we are as beloved children of God, learn to acknowledge our needs and emotions with curiosity and compassion, and rediscover the purpose and power of our unique stories through the lens of the gospel. As a licensed therapist and ministry leader, I want to give voice to the many questions we face while cultivating a clearer view of how our faith informs our healing journey. I don't have all the answers, but I am committed to going deeper and walking together. So whether you've been to therapy or know exactly what you believe when it comes to theology, I want to invite you to join this journey as we fearlessly name the complexities of our present reality and press into the hope of the gospel story. So are you ready? Let's jump into today's question and begin this journey together.
Providing for your family is a top priority. But what happens when you need affordable health care? Christian Healthcare Ministries could save you up to 40% today. As a member, you can choose your provider without network restrictions. Sign up at your convenience with our anytime enrollment. Join a Christian community that supports each other's medical expenses, offering peace of mind as you prioritize what's most important. Enroll now at yourchm.org.
Anticipated rock holiday tradition returns. Trans-Siberian Orchestra, live in concert, coming to a city near you. A legendary blend of rock, classical, and holiday music for the entire family. Don't miss Trans-Siberian Orchestra, live in concert. The Ghosts of Christmas Eve. Go to tsotickets.com for info.
Hey guys, it's Carly from Therapy and Theology. I'm so excited to be diving into part 2 of this series with Dr. Camden Morgante as we explore what it looks like to have an embodied faith, one that holds our spirituality and sexuality in a healthy and God-honoring way. Last week's episode, we began processing purity culture, identifying a definition, the history of it, and the impact it has on us both emotionally and spiritually. Today, I want to continue where we left off and discuss pathways for recovery, both for our bodies and for our beliefs. And what I like to call embodied faith, this integration of our sexuality and our spirituality. So you mentioned last week, the first step to recovery or reconstruction is this awareness. What does this look like in practice or process? And what should people expect in the journey of reconstructing a healthy view of sexuality?
What does it look like in process is identifying your beliefs and identifying the source, like I said. So I'll have my clients write down on a piece of paper 3 columns. The first column, like what the belief is. The second column, what's the source of this belief? And then the third column, why? Why did they give you this belief? Why might they have taught this to you? So that's what it looks like practically. And then you were saying, what should we expect in the journey of reconstruction? Expect it to take a while, we always say in therapy, you didn't get here overnight. It took years of programming to get here. So it does take a while to reconstruct because like we said in our last episode, you cannot just think your way into these beliefs. You can't turn them on and off like a light switch and be healed. It has to be an embodied experience. So I talk with my clients about developing a new understanding, which is the belief, but also a new experience, which is the emotional and behavioral component. And sometimes that looks like setting up experiences or experiments in your life to help you live out that new belief.
What could that look like practically for someone?
Yeah, an example of that. Like I remember one client I was working with, she had this fear of men and this belief that men can't be trusted, which really comes from purity culture. I mean, it comes from other sources too, but a lot of purity cultures that men can't control themselves sexually and men are going to look at you with lust and a lot of fear in male-female relationships. And so she had this same fear and distrust of men. And so one of the ways that she tried to live out a new belief is having just small conversations, like just acquaintances that were male, with the barista at Starbucks that's the male, or with, her neighbor who's going to check his mail or something, like just experiencing those small, brief interactions as safe and as non-sexual. Like I can say, hey, how's your day going? And what are you drinking for coffee or something like that without being sexually objectified. And so I was supporting her to do that in ways that felt safe for her and in baby steps. But each little baby step and each interaction helps to strengthen the neural pathways of that new belief of some men can be safe and trustworthy. Not all, because that wouldn't be realistic to say all men are safe and trustworthy. But it is realistic to say that some are. Helping her set up those experiences and then also avoiding all or nothing thinking. Again, like I just demonstrated, not all men are safe. Not all women are safe, but some are. Men are, I might say. So avoiding the all or nothing thinking, being able to look for exceptions in her life of men across her life who had felt safe, or men that she was able to have platonic friendships with that weren't sexualized. So those are some examples of setting up experience.
I love that. That's such a great way of doing it. So in this process of reintegration, as I've called it, or reconstruction, I'm curious as to, the way that you see this new imagination for our sexuality as believers in the faith. What essential aspects do you see in this integration, or how we start to see sexuality as a beautiful part of our personhood given by God?
Mm-hmm. I think it can first start with at the head or the cognitive level with the beliefs. So sometimes I encourage my clients to search for truth about the body and about sexuality. And that can look like some different sources of truth. Could look like scripture. It could look like church tradition. It can look like trusted experts and reading books and listening to podcasts and things like that. It also comes from like research, like reading research, trusting science and evidence-based research, and then your own experience. What has your own experience taught you, or what do you notice around you? What does others' experience teach you? So searching for those sources of truth and coming up with these new beliefs that you feel are supported. It also comes from people embracing their sexuality, whether you're single or married, being able to embrace your identity as a sexual, being aware of yourself and your sexuality, and finding healthy and values congruent ways to express your sexuality. So I always want to work within my clients' value system, help them figure out what their beliefs and values are. And so for my single clients that want to avoid and abstain from premarital sex, how can you still express your sexuality? How can you still experience sensual pleasure using your five senses, using the body? There's just a lot of suppression of the body, and it's suppression of the sexuality. And that is so hard to turn on and flip the switch once you're married if you've been doing that for 20 to 30 or 40 years. Like, I want people to be able to continue to make the choices that are aligned with their values, but also to feel comfortable in their sexuality and feel empowered in their sexuality, whether they're married or single, like I said. So that's an important part of embodying our sexuality and spirituality and integrating them together.
I love that. I think it was Deborah Hirsch that talks about just social sexuality versus sexual sexuality, sensual sexuality. And I just love that ability to see sexuality as more than just sex, right? I think I say to people all the time, like, what is your definition of sexuality? And oftentimes they actually give me the definition of sexualization, which is very interesting. And so to be able to say like sexuality is, so much more than just sex or engaging in sex, sexual exploration. And so I love that idea of what ways can we embody this? How can we connect to ourselves, to others, and to God? That's great.
And how can we experience that as good and as pure and holy? I've been saying in my coaching work that one of my goals is to help my clients get their head, heart, and body aligned, like we're talking about, to have that alignment, that we're all on the same page, our minds and our beliefs, our emotions and feelings, that's the heart, and then our actions and our body's response. And I had a client who helped me add soul to that, because she said, I also have to know that this is honoring of God and that my body is holy and sacred in order to like really feel this alignment. And so I added soul. So now I've got head, heart, body, and soul, getting all of those in alignment and integrated so that you not only know that your sexuality is good, but you believe that in your heart. You feel it in your heart. You live it out in your body. And you also know that to be true in your soul because you trust that God made your body and you were made in the image of God and that your sexuality is a good gift, not sinful or dirty or shameful.
Right. Oh, it's so good. So I want to pivot a little bit because I get asked this question a lot by people at my church and by parents of my teens. When parents are listening to this kind of thing, I think a lot of times as a parent, and I'm not one, so you could speak into this more than I could, I think there's such I would assume weight or, feeling of I want to teach my children the way, right? The way that is flourishing and abundant and safe, right? And so what would you say some of the best resources or even just from your insights in working with parents for teaching children how to love and respect their bodies as God does? What's a different way of looking at it so we're not kind of repeating the purity culture movement in our parenting?
Providing for your family is a top priority. But what happens when you need affordable health care? Christian Healthcare Ministries could save you up to 40% today. As a member, you can choose your provider without network restrictions. Sign up at your convenience with our anytime enrollment. Join a Christian community that supports each other's medical expenses, offering peace of mind as you prioritize what's most important. Enroll now at yourchm.org.
Most anticipated rock holiday tradition returns. Trans-Siberian Orchestra, live in concert, coming to a city near you. A legendary blend of rock, classical, and holiday music for the entire family. Don't miss Trans-Siberian Orchestra, live in concert. The Ghosts of Christmas Eve. Go to tsotickets.com for info.
Yeah. The way of looking at it is the middle path. And I'm a DBT therapist in dialectical behavior therapy. And so we talk about walking the middle path, avoiding the black and white all or nothing. And so often when people come out of purity culture and they become parents and they're raising their kids, there's a sense of purity culture didn't work. I see how it hurt me and all the shame it created. So I must need to just swing the opposite direction and just teach my kids that as long as it's consensual, that any sexual behavior is okay. Because this is our culture's sexual ethic today, is an ethic of consent. Since the Me Too movement, which was very needed, and I'm glad that we're talking about consent because consent needs to be the bedrock of any sexual ethic, but it doesn't have to be all there is. So one of my big beliefs is we do not have to swing between the extremes of purity culture to this ethic of consent. But we can still teach our kids that the sacredness of sex and what we believe is God's purpose for sex and God's design for sex, if you still believe that that's within marriage, we can teach that to our kids in a way that is not shaming and does not have the methods of purity culture. So you're asking about resources. Honestly, the best resource is the parents themselves. All good parenting starts with reparenting.
Yeah, so good.
So reparenting yourself and doing the hard work of healing yourself from purity culture and figuring out what your beliefs are and what your sexual ethic is. That is what your education to your kids will flow out of. So you have to start with working on yourself, and that's the best resource I can offer you, not a book or not any other expert in what they say, but just doing your own work to be healthy and to heal in yourself. And then it's also things like just being available and making it an ongoing conversation and being available and open to questions with your kids and empowering them with age-appropriate knowledge and information, and talk about things like consent and abuse prevention, but also talk about that God made their bodies and all of their body is good and beautiful, including their genitals. And then, just not being afraid to talk about it and to use the proper terms for their genitals or to talk about sex and to incorporate your family's values into everyday conversations. I'm a big proponent of it being woven into everyday life rather than a one and done sit down sex talk.
That's so true. I see that so often. It's like, my parents talked to me about this one time and we never talked about it again, instead of it being just an ongoing conversation of life, That's so good. I want to circle back to something you said that I think is so powerful, that, good parenting starts with reparenting. And I truly believe that's true. I think it's emotional, healthy, embodied spirituality. It's so helpful to look back at our stories
right? And be able to live out of those stories in light of the newness of our, new creation in Christ. And something that I do think is so helpful for parents is to recognize if we're feeling awkward about it, as a parent, then it's going to be an awkward conversation with the kid. And the kid's going to take from that, the message away from that is, oh, we don't talk about this, or this is awkward, right? Or this is not something that I should feel or think, etc. And so anytime I do work around sexuality with parents, I'm always like, okay, we're going to talk about it. It's not awkward. Like, let's have this conversation be something that can be so beautiful, but has been, yes, I think shattered by sexualization and abuse in our culture. And so kind of reimagining that for parents, I think is really, really helpful. Thank you for that. All right. So finally, I'd love for you to share maybe a practice or application that listeners can engage in, if you have one, or something that you think could be a great takeaway to continue this conversation in their homes, in their relationships, or in their communities.
Yeah, I think doing like a thought record, like I mentioned earlier, writing down the beliefs and where they came from is a good tool to start with. And also taking that a step further, because I'll start with that intervention and then I'll add on to it. So my step 2 is we add on to it by adding columns in for how does this belief affect you? What emotions does it create for you? And then what effect does it have on your body? So you might take a belief like, I need to dress a certain way so I don't cause men to lust. And you might say, where does that come from? Maybe I heard that in youth group growing up. Why did they teach me that? Well, they might have, really wanted to prevent problems in the youth group, like when it comes to like the male-female relationships, but also they were just teaching what they've always heard. And they were also, it's a way to let men off the hook. It's a way to not teach young men self-discipline and respect for women, but putting the burden on women as the gatekeepers. There's that component of it too. And then add another column for emotions. So this belief causes me shame. It makes me angry. And then add another column for body. So I feel shame in my body. I feel like I need to cover up. I'm like really anxious when I go out of the house if I'm wearing certain things, or maybe I'm suspicious and distrusting of men. Yeah. So looking at like, how does this belief affect you? And that creates more awareness. Like we were talking about, this creating awareness. And then the next step would be replacing that belief. So that would be this kind of a series of steps coaching work is first identifying and then starting to deconstruct that belief and then replacing it or reconstructing it.
Awesome. That's a great one. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts and your insights. I would love to, encourage listeners, check out the work that Dr. Camden's doing. And if you want some coaching, I know that that's a service that you offer. Are you seeing people outside of your state of Tennessee?
Yeah, so I have a therapy practice that's just for Tennessee, but my coaching practice is online anywhere in the world. And I work with women or couples for period culture.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Therapy and Theology. If you have a question or topic you would like discussed on a future episode, please feel free to email me or drop it in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe to have each week's episode instantly downloaded to your podcasts, and see the show notes for resources mentioned in this episode. To access more content and join my monthly email list for the latest updates and info, visit my website at carlymarcoulier.com.
Do you live, work, or play in downtown Baltimore? The Charm City Circulator travels through some of Baltimore's most charming neighborhoods, and best of all, it's free. Our transit service is convenient, reliable, and eco-friendly. Feel free to circulate. Visit charmcitycirc.com.